Well met, weary traveller. Come in and sit by the fire for a moment. Take up your flagon of ale or mead, and lend your ear. Let us regale you with the tales of bygone adventure and of the wisdom of ages. Or, just listen in while two dudes named Jeff and Jeremy talk a lot about role-playing games.
Or we could go Star Wars. Because that's just happened. The trailer just dropped for that not that long ago.
I haven't seen it yet.
You haven't seen the trailer?
I haven't seen the trailer yet.
Are you not a trailer guy?
So basically what happened is, like, when it first came out, immediately I saw some people start saying, like, the trailer's really cool, but it might have some, like, spoilery stuff in it. So maybe don't watch if you care about that.
Sure, I can understand that.
And then, like, by the time that, like, more information started coming out and people were like, well, actually, maybe it's not really that spoilery, and it really was kind of stuff that you probably already assumed anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Like, by that time that stuff started following up the spoiler warning stuff, I just kind of, like, moved on. Like, I just forgot about it, that it even existed. And it's like, now each time that I remember about it, it's always, like, in the context of, like, talking to someone or doing something where it's like, well, I'm not just gonna, like, go watch it right now. Like, I'll watch it later when I remember, and then I just immediately forget.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. They waited a really long time to kind of release this version of the trailer, at least, and it definitely made the hype real again.
Nice.
I'm a big Star Wars fan. I always have been. So, obviously the Lucas prequels were a little bit of a well, they're the prequels. So I've actually been really, really excited with the new ones that Disney has been putting out. I think they've done a really good job with kind of striking the feel of the old ones while updating them where they needed it.
Yeah, I found people to be surprisingly divided on the 7th movie, The Force Awakens. I liked it a lot. I thought it was really good. Like, I can see where some of the complaints are of, like, it's literally like a New Hope, like, story, like, almost exactly. Like, it's literally the New Hope story with new characters and, like, advancing the plot of the previous ones a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I can see why some people thought that was kind of but I really enjoyed the 7th movie a lot, and I've seen a lot of people that were like, no, I don't like it.
Yeah, well,
what's your stance on the 7th movie?
I liked it. I liked it a lot. I thought it was exactly what the franchise needed. Because again, Lucas, he took everything about Star Wars that was showy and at the surface seemed great, but it didn't have any of the depth and the I don't know, just the classic storytelling archetypes and things that the Joseph Campbell hero's story kind of stuff lying underneath it. It didn't feel like it had any of those things. And I think 7 made a strong return towards that, even if it was just kind of I don't feel like it was a copy of A New Hope, but it certainly had similar notes that it hit.
Yeah, I mean, it has a similar formula.
Yeah, very much so. I think it probably would have
like
felt
the
less
person,
so.
like the person lost on the desert planet,
yes,
who then, like, gets found and taken in. They, like, end up kind of sidewinding their way into this weird rebellion process, like, where they blow up the planet-destroying Empire ship, and then like, find that there's more to the Force than meets the eye.
Yeah,
like,
very much so.
Both of those movies follow that pattern, like, exactly. But I agree that, like, it's not like A New Hope reskinned. It's just like, like you say, like, there's so much about Star Wars particularly, and a lot of those movies, like Lord of the Rings does this a ton as well, of, like, following, like the classic, like, mythological structure. Like, you brought up the Joseph Campbell's, like, hero journey thing. It's like these are like the stories that are like inherent to humanity, that we've like developed these story cycles over like as long as we've been able to speak and think.
Mm-hmm.
So like to me, like returning to that formula is not a negative thing. It's like, well, of course you're going to return to that. It's like that is the story formula. Like, how are you not going to return to it?
Exactly.
Like it's more difficult to avoid it than it is to follow it.
And I think
Star Wars, I think, follows in that same
Yeah, I'm
thing.
sorry. And when people stray from it on purpose, I think a lot of times it ends up feeling forced. And a lot of times it ends up falling flat. I think there's a reason that these tropes, if you want to call them that, these archetypes, I think there's a reason why they've risen to the top and why we see them time and time again. Is because, like you said, there's something intrinsic about it that speaks to us as human beings. The things that we need to hear. The things like evils can be conquered and the good guys will win in the end. We have to believe those kinds of things in order for a certain status quo to be maintained in society. We have to believe...
Yeah, I mean, like it...
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, please, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, just the whole idea of, like, we're in a comfort zone, and then we figure out that maybe there's more that could be done with our lives, that maybe we shouldn't just, sit at home and live our life, that we should, like, figure out who we are and what we should be doing as humans.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, that journey away from home, so to speak, like, if you want to use the myth terms, and then, like, the conflict that comes with that, the struggle of, like, finding your identity and pushing against adversity,
Mm-hmm.
and then, like, finding out a secret that lets you come back around and, like, be a better person and return to your comfort zone with a new perspective. Like, that's just what it's like to be a person. Like, that's, like, take away storytelling, take away movies or tabletop or anything. Like, that's just being a person. Like, that's all that is what it's like to be a person. And when you, like, take that structure and you form it into these stories, like, there's a reason that it's so powerful to us, because it's literally, like, if I could be the ideal person, if I could be the best me that I can conceptualize, like, that's mostly what these stories are. At least that's the way that I see it.
Yeah.
It's like, you take all the good parts about a bunch of people and you put them together, and you have a Luke Skywalker, or, like, that's, and then you kind of extract that out. You boil it down to just those pure main pieces and take away all the extra mundane stuff that gets in the way and clouds the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And you end up with these types of stories. Like, you just can't get away from them. Like you say, when you try to get away from them, it's like, no, I'm not going to tell that story. It feels unnatural because you've taken away, like, the human part of it. Yeah,
very much so. Yeah, the part that you can identify with. And that's a great point. The getting out of your comfort zone, the development that you have to go through as a character in order to be interesting, to have that journey, that arc that carries you through. And really the best way to do that is starting off usually naive and full of inhibitions. And then as you experience the world and gain knowledge and slowly experience more of what life has to offer, danger and otherwise, it brings you out of your shell and you discover kind of what you really are on the inside. You get out of your own way. Which
exactly. Yeah, it's
is also the topic of our podcast this evening, as a matter of fact.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is the Dudes of Yore. I am Jeremy. My co-host here is Jeff. We are talking tonight about the art of letting go. What it is about RPGs that kind of means that you need to kind of get out of yourself, get out of your comfort zone, step away from your Tatooine, if you will, and kind of go and see what the galaxy has to offer. But you have to make that initial first step. You have to decide that you want to let go of what's familiar. So, what do you think about that, Jeff?
yeah, it's such an important part of like we were talking about earlier, just like it's such an important part of being a person, but even more specifically for tabletop games. Like tabletop gaming tends to have a pull, generally speaking, towards people who are less social, I would say.
Yeah.
Like generally are people that are more creative, but they're also more prone to like anxiety, depression, and like fear of judgment. Like at least I know that I've had a lot of those feelings. And like they put up a wall between them and the game where it's like, you know, maybe I'm not going to speak in character. Like I'm going to describe what my character is saying instead of say it in character because it's more comfortable to me. And like, instead of like pushing the barrier and saying, you know, the game would be better and I would have more fun if I were to speak in character instead of describe it. But I'm afraid that I'm going to do it wrong or say the wrong thing or people are going to laugh at me or it won't come out the way that I want it to. And like they end up putting up these barriers and putting up these walls where they say like, I don't want to experience that part of the game because it makes me push myself in a way that I'm not comfortable with doing, instead of just like letting go and diving in.
Yeah, so I mean, very much one of the things that I wanted to talk about, and you've hit on it right now, is inhibitions. Is, you know, like you said, these walls that you've put forth, that a lot of people put forth. They put themselves into a box, you know, a safe space, which not safe space in the way that the term is usually used. That's not exactly what I mean. But like a safe space where everything is rote, where everything, like you said, is predictable and normal.
Yeah, I mean it ends up being this situation where basically, like you say, like obviously we're not using safe space in the way that it's used like politically today. Like that's not at all what we're talking about. But you put up these you put yourselves in these situations where, like you're saying, it's you do the comfortable thing and the easy thing instead of the more enjoyable thing. Like you let that wall hold you back from doing something that you know would be better, but you choose not to do because you're not willing to confront it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think a lot of that is driven... fear is a really, really strong word, I think, to describe exactly what I'm talking about. But that's kind of what I'm getting at, is most of the time I hear from people who say things like, well, I would like to do an accent, but I can't. Or I know it would be bad. Or what they're really saying is that they're afraid that somebody is going to judge them about it, to tell them that it's not good enough, or that it's not going to measure up in their eyes compared to somebody else in the community, or whoever else it is that they may be comparing themselves to. And I can understand that. I have gone through that. I still go through it. It's just a normal thing. I think there's very few people in the world who have the amount of confidence to just step out there and think that there's nobody else that's doing it better. And I think especially in our hobby, the majority of us are used to, like you said, we're the people who tend to be on the fringe. We've been made fun of or isolated or made to feel like we don't belong, or that we're inferior, or all of the above, in some aspect of society, usually in school, you know. So we come into this hobby worried that we might meet more of the same. But the truth of the matter is that the majority of the people that are in this hobby have gone through the same thing, if not worse than you. And if you will open yourself up a little more, if you will step out beyond your inhibitions, you might just give somebody else the courage to reciprocate and step out of their comfort zone. And when you both kind of step out of your comfort zone, that's when the magic happens. Because you peel back all the bullshit. You peel back all of the emotional baggage that a lot of people bring, and then you just start having fun like you're a kid again. Then you're pretending. And that's what this hobby is really about, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think you touched on something really important there. I think people underestimate the amount of, I guess, I don't know if it's the right word, but vulnerability that you have to put forth in this kind of hobby. And it's not something that people are used to doing. More often than not, people will protect themselves from other people rather than, put themselves in a situation where they might end up getting hurt. Because like you say, we have had so many of those situations where you try to do something cool and it gets shut down, you get made fun of, and you're like, oh, well, Jesus, I'm never doing that again. That was terrible. And it just trains you into such a bad space where that becomes your expectation. I think, like you say, there's a certain magic that starts to click in a game when everybody at the table manages to drop that, at least a little bit, if not all the way. And you kind of get to touch on the parts of the hobby that make the hobby so interesting. The deeper characters, the actual conversations, and the people who have real personalities instead of just false ego manifestations. And it kind of digs deeper and makes it more real. And like you say, it lets you drop that kind of facade of, and just really enjoy it for what it is. A story that everybody's telling full-heartedly, no holding back, no keeping the gun at the hip. You're just, once you can learn to go all in, and if everybody at the table collectively does that, those are when you get the games that you'll remember forever.
Oh yeah. Yeah, those are the ones where by the end of the evening, everybody's emotional. You may actually bring the table to tears. It's happened only, God, I can count on one hand, maybe 3 times in my 20 plus years of gaming, where I have felt emotionally moved enough at the table to actually tear up, to actually cry. It's not the same thing as sobbing at a funeral or anything like that.
Of course.
But where it definitely moves you emotionally more than you might have expected whenever you sat down to play the game. In those moments when it catches you off guard like that, and you find yourself more invested than you initially thought or planned on, that's, to me, that is the beauty of what we do. That's the rawness of storytelling at its finest. Storytelling, when your audience is moved in any emotional capacity, really, then you've done your job as a storyteller. You have affected someone on a very fundamental level. And when you can do that as a collective, as a storytelling group, and affect yourself as as part of the storytelling, then that's phenomenal, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I guess that's something that I see a lot of people say that kind of, I guess, always puts me off is probably a little bit too strong, but it always just makes me think a little bit, when they talk about tabletop RPGs or things like that, they'll say well, why should I care that much? It's just a game. Why should I put that much of me into what's essentially a board game with voices? And it's it always kind of irks me. For me, at least. Now, not every table is going to be different. Some people don't want to be super serious and into it.
Sure.
That's what I love about it. But, it can be so much more than just a game. Yes, it is a game, but it's also more than a game, in a lot of ways. And, like you say, to be able to experience genuine sadness in a situation that is not actually impacting your real life as a whole, I think is a very useful experience to have.
Yeah.
It's very, at least for me, it's very therapeutic and very enjoyable. to be able to explore like what's it like to mourn a fallen friend, and not actually have to worry about one of your actual friends having like died or something like that.
Absolutely.
To be able to like get into that mindset and explore it and really feel around it, like I think it helps. At least it helps me as a person to like feel more connected to like myself in a way that like having to actually go through these experiences in real life can't do, because you have the disconnect of all the consequences of reality piling in.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
You can kind of separate that part of it from the feeling itself. Like I think it can be a very interesting experience and a way to kind of challenge yourself and your personality and like push your boundaries out and explore your mind and your emotions in a way that has no consequences and like lets you dive into it. And to me, like that is like the perfect penultimate RPG experience right there, is when you go through a session at the end and you're like, wow, that was a lot, but it was awesome.
Yeah, it's again, like I think that's why storytelling is such a pervasive art form in human culture, in human history. It lets us, like you said, it lets us experience emotions kind of in a trial run. You know, it lets us feel things without the danger of it happening to us directly, so that we can be prepared for us if and when it does happen in actuality. You know, and we get to experience, you know, excitement and thrill and danger and sadness and loss and all of those things that stories, really good stories, will put you through. You know, the emotional gamut. And RPGs at their core are just simply a storytelling device. You know, it's a way that you can tell a story as a group. And more importantly, I think one of the features of role-playing games that makes them so successful, that strikes such a chord, is it gives you the tools to control what goes on in these situations, in these moments. So it's not just telling you a tale of grief. You are in the moment of grief, and you have something that you can do about it. And that gives you the kinds of practice that whenever you're struck with grief in your real life, even if you know, in real life you understand, well, my rogue would have just done XYZ, and obviously you can't do XYZ. You can't just hide in the shadows and stab whatever your problem is in the back. You know, that's not an okay thing to do. But it still, for most humans, for people who are able to separate, you know, reality and fantasy, but understand the metaphor that is presented in the game, it gives you kind of an idea as to how to handle those things in real life. So they're a very useful tool, really, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think something that might be interesting, at least interesting for me, and hopefully interesting for people to who are listening. Like how about I'll do one and you do one. What do you think is your example of like the most into it that you've been in a session? Like what's like the farthest down? Like what was the scenario in the game where you were like the most connected into your character, or as the GM into the world that you've experienced so far? And like what do you think made that so special?
There's probably two different instances that come to mind at first, both of which are moments like I was talking about with that kind of became, you know, emotional. The first of which, I was playing a character who was a half-orc, so he was very much not a part of accepted society, but he was a very good-hearted, I think he was a cleric, and he had it was a campaign where it was him and his brother, his half-brother, who were the adventuring party, and it was being played by my friend Mike, and our buddy Brian was running the game, And essentially there was this whole thing where my character ended up having a woman that he fell in love with, but she was a part of the dream realm. And he was able to basically negotiate her release from the dream realm, so that she could come with him to the mortal realm, and, they could hopefully live happily ever after. Well, we kind of left the threshold between the dream realm and the mortal realm, and as they were stepping across the threshold, she, like a dream, just became tatters and ribbons. She disappeared, through his fingertips. And it was one of those things where it had played out very, very well in the session, and then, at the moment, we play background music during our games whenever we play, so the music was really sullen and somber, and it was just one of those moments where everything just kind of meshed really, really well. And, he finished describing how she had disappeared, and the three of us kind of took a breath and kind of looked around, and all of us had our tears welling up in our eyes, and we were like, okay, we need to take a minute just to kind of decompress from that. But it was nice. It was a good moment. What about you?
Yeah, so for me, the one that was most recent and probably the biggest, so I'm playing in Lionel from Two Guys Tea and D&D, their channel. He's running a Middle-earth campaign that I am in with a few others. It's called The Road Goes Ever On. So if you are watching that and haven't seen it and want to watch it, go watch that before you listen to me say this, because spoilers and all that. But that aside, with all full disclosures put forward of spoilers and all that, so it's in Middle-earth, of course. I am playing a ranger, a Dunedain. So I have all this experience, and lifestyle built around fighting orcs and all the minions of evil. But basically we find out that the orcs are getting stronger and more brave, they're going out in the sunlight and into lands that they normally wouldn't go into. So we're trying to investigate. And I, as a ranger in particular, am I need to figure out what's going on because I'm supposed to be protecting these people. So I end up meeting the rest of the party, and basically enlisting them to go with me, basically trading, if you help me with this, I'll help you with what you're trying to do, and then we'll all be fine.
Sure.
And then one of the characters, I think it was in the second session, maybe the third, died during one of the fights. And in a pretty rough manner. You're basically ambushed by wargs with orcs, and this gigantic warg, and he just got ripped up to shreds. And I, as the ranger who had responsibility for protecting these people and fulfilling the deal that we made, it was really hard as a character to go through that. And one of the other party members kind of had a secret not direct love interest in that they were connected, but it was kind of that neither one of them wants to say anything, but there's probably something there kind of situation going on between two of the others. So when that character died, it was super heavy. And the next session, because he died at the very end of the session, and we're we're going to call it there, we're going to figure out what we want to do, and then we're going to go on afterwards, next time we meet up. And the entire next session was finishing off a little bit of the escape, and then just funeral and dealing with it. And everybody in the session was totally tuned in and in character. It would have been so easy to crack a little side joke or make a little offhand remark or just do anything to try to break the the heaviness of the situation and try to make it lighthearted, the whole just a game of oh, let's make it fun instead.
Sure.
And just nobody did it. One of the characters, one of the players, I'll say, sung a Middle-earth funeral song for the character that was super heavy. Literally we had people crying during the session, and the people who weren't were almost there. And just everybody was totally in on it and was no, we're not going to try to avoid this feeling. We're not going to skip over this part. we're gonna feel this out, how it would actually be. And like, just nobody broke, like not even once throughout the session. And like, it was just such a cool experience to be able to go through that and literally have everybody be on board.
Yeah, for certain. And again, that kind of thing might not be possible if everybody wasn't willing to buy in, to give up that tendency to hide behind your inhibitions. To be uncomfortable to go there, to be to open up that nerve, if you will. Because an open nerve is raw, and you do stand the chance of feeling pain. But at the same time, that's when you feel the most raw emotion. Is when you have yourself, like you said, vulnerable, when you've got yourself opened up that way, and you're receptive. And it's tough to do. And there's some groups where it's probably not appropriate, where people can't respect that and return it in kind, which is unfortunate. But hopefully, you can play with a group long enough, or at least know each of the individual people that you're playing with well enough to be able to kind of go out on that limb.
Yeah, and I think like something important that you kind of mentioned there a little bit, but I think is worth saying again, like it only takes one person who's not in it to kill it, which is unfortunate, but
very much so.
If 3 out of the 4 people at the table are like letting it all go, and then the 4th person is cracking jokes or making fun, like instantly that total experience is gone.
Yeah.
Which, like, it makes it that much more important as a player to be able to give it your all and completely drop those barriers, because, like, you don't want to be the person who's, like, holding up a scene because, like, you just can't or don't want to go along with it. Like, if someone's trying to do a heavy emotional scene and then you can't get into it and you try to distance yourself and make jokes, like, you're not only, I would say, restricting your own experience, but it's impacting the table environment as well.
Yeah, for certain. And, like, especially a player like me, like, I enjoy levity in most of my games. And I think there are situations where levity is appropriate, and just like anything, just like cursing, just like sexual humor, nudity, any of these kinds of things, if you use them in moderation, I think that it's acceptable and sometimes beneficial to the storytelling. But yes, whenever you use it as a crutch, as an escape from dealing with the situation, that it's problematic. Well, one of the things that I wanted to kind of talk about, speaking about things that may be taboo or potentially hazardous, is one thing that a lot of people might be able to do if they find their inhibitions insurmountable is, and I'm not condoning this in any way, but take a shot. If alcohol is the kind of thing that kind of loosens you up a little and lets you kind of get into it a little bit, take a shot of something. I wouldn't do it to excess, because then the game becomes difficult, or it can, especially if you're running the game. Or if you're in one of those states where, other things are available to you, then, maybe that's an answer too. Again, I'm not condoning it either way, but sometimes you might need help getting past an inhibition. Inhibitions for some people are very deeply rooted. And like phobias, a lot of people just simply have a hard time letting go. And most of what we're saying, unfortunately, thus far at least, is to just let go. And it's kind of one of those things that's easier said than done, for many people, I think, in this hobby especially. So, with that in mind, are there any tips or tools or tricks that that you might have, Jeff, that somebody could employ to try to get them over that step?
Yeah, I do. So the first one, it's gonna seem like the duh, but I'm gonna say it anyways because it's important. If you are in a situation where you are like not comfortable, just completely letting go all the way, like this is something that can be practiced.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that can be worked on. So if you have a hard time letting go of those inhibitions or fighting through them right now, like maybe you can't just next session completely throw those all away, but maybe you can find like 1 minute or one scene where you can let go. And maybe you have to fall back after that to your shelter and stop it. Go, well, okay, I've tried. I can't do any more, but I at least did a little bit. Mm-hmm. Like, those are victories, not failures.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like for a while, that was a huge issue for me of like, you know, I mean, I grew up like an insanely shy person, like cripplingly shy. And you probably wouldn't necessarily say that about me now, given the way that I speak and the way that I hold myself, but it was like a huge part of my life for a long time. So when I got into role-playing games, it was really tough for me to speak in character. Like, it was uncomfortable and it was difficult, and I kept saying the wrong things and messing up. But I was just like, you know what? I'm not going to let that be an excuse. I'm just going to do it, and it's going to be bad. Like, there's nothing wrong with it being bad, because the only way that you can make it good is if you do it bad and then get better. So,
yeah,
any time that you can find a way to push that boundary, even if it's one time in the session where you can, like, I'm going to describe everything that my character says instead of speaking in character, except for I'm going to say one sentence. It's going to be in character. And then maybe next session it's 2 sentences. Maybe the third session, the sentences that you say aren't so flubbed and they come out a little cleaner and a little bit more connected. And the fourth session, they're more connected. And then, you know, you do that for 6 months and suddenly, boom. Like, that's basically what's happened to me. Like, I feel like I'm pretty connected and, like, immersed now in character, and I'm pretty good at portraying the inner character stuff and getting into the emotional stuff. It's something that I've taught myself over the last 10 months, like, that I've been working on and working on and working on. So if this is something that you struggle with, you know, don't treat each session where you're not fully into it as a failure. Anytime that you can push even a little bit, that's good. And next session you can push a little bit more, and next session you can push further than that. And you'll get there. It won't be as fast as you want. Progression in life is never as fast as you want it to be. But you'll make progress, and you'll get there.
Yeah, those are excellent ways of putting that, I think. I think you've made a lot of very, very valid points in that. And, yeah, I mean, I totally get it. You know, likewise, I've struggled with fitting in and being outward with my personality a lot in life. You know, growing up, I had a speech impediment and a stutter. You know, I have always been a pretty quiet individual. I even now, at parties and things, I usually try to find a quiet corner to sit in, and, you know, that's just the way I prefer things. You know, I like watching what's going on and observing things. But I had a lot of trouble, you know, growing up, and eventually I just I went through an epiphany when I was going through my teenage angsty years of I was done being worried about what other people thought about me so much. You know, like, obviously there's still things that I consider whenever other people are talking to me, or other people's point of views and things of that nature, but I stopped trying to impress people. It stopped being important to me, and that was a huge eye-opening moment for me as a teenager, especially. And then shortly after, I ended up meeting the woman who would eventually become my wife, and she was involved in theater arts, so I was like, oh, that's cool. I've always kind of liked movies and playing pretend and stuff. That sounds like a really fun thing to do. So I got involved in that, and I did that for a number of years.
That'll push you out of your shell real quick.
Well, yeah, but even with that training and the practice that I went through, the 4 years or whatever that I did in high school and in college, it's still something that gets to me. I still get nervous every time I run a game. I still get nervous.
Yeah.
Every time I play in a game. I got nervous before we recorded the podcast episode tonight. It's just it's just a normal part of things. And in my home group, where I run the game most of the time, I didn't used to do voices and things. It wasn't something that my group was particularly into, heavy role play, especially with voices and accents and things of that nature. And I found myself envious of the games that I would watch or listen to where the table was doing that. Mm-hmm. And I finally just told myself, you know what? It's stupid that I'm sitting here envying these other groups to being able to do this. And I'm just going to do it. Whether it's bad, whether it makes people laugh, or whether I look like a fool or an idiot, I don't care anymore. I think that that's a key ingredient in my games that I'm missing. And so I just started doing it. And just like I tell the people that ask me, well, how do you start doing accents? How do you get into a character's voice? How do you just make yourself do it? And really, there's not a secret. It's just about doing it. That's the secret. And even if it is bad, even if the accent that you're doing is inconsistent, you're trying. That's the key.
Yeah. I think people take too much for granted. This is something that I just hate about life in general, but it applies to tabletop RPG too. Are some people naturally more inclined or talented in certain areas than others? Yes. Is the gap between people's abilities more talent or more practice? It's 3% talent, 97% practice. Just because you see somebody else do an accent and they're perfect at it and they have such a nuanced character voice and a speaking style that matches their character's personality that's totally different from their natural speaking style, that person's probably been doing that for years. Being bad is it's not a reason to stop, it's a reason to keep going. Mm-hmm. Because that practice and that cycle of trying, improving, trying and improving, that's how you'll get to the point where you can have a consistent accent and a character voice. Talent is just I think it's an excuse that people like to use. They see someone just totally kill an accent and they're like, they just must be a good accent person, and mm-hmm. I'm not a good accent person, so I'll just stick to not doing it because I'm not good at it. And it's that to me, if you'll pardon my French, is bullshit. It's just you can't do that to yourself because you'll never be good. You'll never learn to do the things that you want to do if you just chalk it up to inability. Everybody's bad at it when they start. You just don't see them practicing for hours in their room, with nobody around trying to get good at it.
Yeah. Fear is the mind killer. But no, it's... Yeah. Anytime that I decide that I'm going to do an accent, and by no means am I an expert at doing accents, but it is something that I've incorporated into my repertoire, if you want to call it that, and I enjoy doing them. I enjoy trying them. So when I decide that I'm going to do one, or when I know that I've got an NPC coming up that I want to do a voice with, I know I look like an idiot driving on the highway because I'm practicing how to do this accent. I'm not only practicing the kind of pattern of speech, but I'm also kind of trying to do things with my voice, the timbre and the tone and the pace. And like you said, it's all just practice. It's all just trying out new things and just going with it. And there's plenty of times when I play a character, and the voice or the accent is all over the place. You know, God forbid I try to do like, you know, an Irish or a Scottish accent, and I just hope that I don't ever try to do it with somebody who's actually from Ireland or Scotland in the game, because I just don't know that I'd be able to do it and not feel like a complete shitheel, because it wanders all over the place. But at the same time,
yeah.
I've found that when I'm playing a character, when I give them a voice that's different than my own, it helps me get out of myself and get more into the character being a different person from me.
Absolutely. Yeah, like, even if it's just something as simple as, like, I'm not much of an accent person. Like, it's just, like, I don't really enjoy, like, it's just not something that's like, oh, yeah, I want to do an accent. Mm-hmm. It's just, like, for me, it's not worth, like, the effort that I would need to do as far as, like, the enjoyment per effort ratio.
Sure.
But even if it's just, like, speaking in a different way, like, speak a little bit slower than you normally talk, or a little bit faster than you normally talk, and just, like, balancing those little things, like, can push you a little bit further into the world, like you say, of saying, I'm experiencing something that's different from me. And even if it's just, like, a linguistic thing, like, that's one of my favorite things about playing in Middle-earth games, is people try to talk like it's Middle-earth. And that, like, just trying to do that conveys a different mood about the game than you would have if you were just talking normally. And it kind of forces people to be in character because they want to put that feeling across. It's like, that's the same thing in every game that you do. Like, just those little adjustments that you can make that'll go a long way towards, like, putting your mind further into the experience.
Exactly. And again, like, all of these things that I think that we're describing, it's such a strange thing as an adult to have to try to explain to other adults, and even just to make sense of it for myself, when really what I feel like all that we're doing is just telling you how to be a kid. Like, you know, just how to stop worrying about it, stop letting out all of these things get in your way, and just throw yourself in, just, you know, with wild abandon. You know, just make fun your number one priority.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in your role-playing experience, in whatever game that you're in. And just have a ball, you know? And if it makes people laugh at you, then okay. Find funny things to say, you know? Earn that laughter. You know, don't let it get to you. Yeah.
So I do have another tip, but it's kind of a diversion in topic, so if you have something to say about that specifically, go ahead and wrap it up. But
no, please do.
Another tip that I would say that helps me a lot, especially like if I'm going into a game that I'm especially nervous about or feeling anxious about, that's like kind of blocking me from being in the zone. Something that helps me a ton in those situations. So for me personally, everybody's experience with anxiety and that kind of thing is different. Mm-hmm. But for me, like, it's mostly because I'm thinking too much about me. Like, you know, I'm thinking like, well, what if I say the wrong thing? What if I don't do something right in the world? And it's like, all these thoughts are like me. And you kind of push yourself away from what's going on. And like, you kind of lock yourself inside your head. Mm-hmm. So what's helped me a lot in those situations where that's bad is look at somebody else at the table and just do whatever you can to make them look awesome. Like, direct your attention away from yourself and what you're going to say and how you're going to act, and look at how somebody else is acting and try to find cool things about it. Is the DM's description particularly cool? Does the character say something really nice or do something really cool? Latch yourself on to them and let their enthusiasm pull you into the game, because it will. Like, and if you do that enough and you kind of teach yourself to work in that way, that for me is like an immediate, like, I'm anxious in a game up until somebody else does something awesome, and then I'm right there in the world. Like, so I guess just if you're feeling stressed or you're feeling uncomfortable, let somebody else kind of drive the car and hop in the passenger seat with them and let them kind of drive you enough until you can get ready to push yourself.
Yeah.
Say.
Man, that is a fantastic point, Jeff, because having that as a, for lack of a better term, a default, a way to fall back on whenever you can't find the what you need to push you past. Having that to fall back on is such a great thing, because that's the kind of thing that everybody should be trying to do anyways at the table. That's the kind of thing that makes these games into such a great cooperative team, experience, is those moments where you lift the other person up, when they have that volley that they send over to you, and you hit it right back to them, and you guys just build back and forth, and then when you're done, it's greater than the sum of its parts. I think that's fantastic advice, dude. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's such a powerful tool, and like, as you kind of work with that a little bit more, you kind of find ways to like integrate yourself into it a little bit better. Like, a great example of this for me, so I was playing in a setting that I had never played in before, and I knew a little bit about it, but not like super hardcore. Mm-hmm. So I was a little bit nervous going into the game, even more so than I normally get, because it's like, I don't want to be the guy who like messes up the feel of the world and like say something like, oh, well, I'm going to say something about the gods, and it turns out there's no gods in this setting, and it, like, those kind of worries about like, well, I don't know this well enough to do it. And then there was a moment in the game where like somebody else like really, really locked into like a key point of the setting. Like they like said something about like in the world. It was just like, oh man, that's so cool. Like the way that they brought out that part of the setting was like really, really interesting. And like for me, that was like right there. Like suddenly all the nervousness was gone, and I was just like invested in how cool that person was. And like then I just kind of like you say, they do something really cool, and then instead of trying to like think and you're up inside your own head like, well, now what do I want to say? Just respond back to them so you can like create that feedback loop of, that's super cool what you did, so let's push that a little bit further. And then you kind of tie yourself into it, and the more that you tie yourself into the cool thing that they're doing, the less you have to worry about whether or not what you're doing is cool, because you're doing their cool thing and helping them with it.
Yeah. And I think that kind of thing is echoed throughout the hobby in general, is building on other people's great ideas. You don't have to always be the foundation layer. You can be the other tiers that kind of make up this mountain of awesomeness, that you're all building together. And if you're unsure, if you don't know what to do, then if you find someone else who lays down a solid foundation, then start stacking, start building on top of that. And you'll find that other people will return the favor. And then there will come a time when you're the one who lays that foundation layer. And it may not be intentional. You may just say something off the cuff, or the DM may put you on the spot, and you may come up with something quick. And somebody else may jump on it. And a lot of the times, if you've been the one who's been helping other people shine, a good player will reciprocate. They'll return the favor later on. They'll find a moment to lift you up as a favor.
Yeah, I mean, it's just such a useful tool, not only, like you say, for just having games be better in general, but to help, like, instead of just trying to climb over all your own barriers, let somebody else help you over that wall.
Yeah.
Like, let them bring you through it, and it'll be easier that way. Like, you'll be able to drop the barriers faster than if you were only trying to break through them yourself.
Yeah. And I think most of us that are in the hobby, we're here for a reason. And most of the time that's because we have a deep sense of imagination, a need to create. Even if people are afraid to actually create, to get the initial creation going, most of us at least have it in us to build upon something else we see. We see an idea in a movie or in a book, and we're like, oh, wouldn't it be awesome if instead of this thing happened, if this other thing happened? And having someone else draw that out of you, you'll get lost and caught up in that creative mode, once you just get going, and soon most people will find their inhibitions falling away. It's just a natural thing that I think happens, is the more you get invested in what's going on, the less you're concerned with, oh, well, I got to remember to not let myself get too wrapped up in what's going on. I don't want to embarrass myself. Most people, if they get wrapped up in it enough, will throw all that to the side.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so I have one more tip that comes to mind. But any tips that you would have that you think would help somebody to break down the barriers?
No, man, you're on a home run streak, so I'm just going to let you keep going for now. I'll just keep adding on.
This one's a little bit of a departure from the previous ones, but it's just as important. If you're in a group and you try to do some of these things that we've mentioned, you try to let go of the inhibitions, you try to get into character or do a voice or, get emotionally invested, and the table shoots you down for that, you're at the wrong table. Like, I'm just going to say it. Like, it's not easy. And for me, like, this is something that it's not even necessarily like an attack at the other people at the table. That's not what I'm trying to say. So an example from my own tabletop gaming experience. My first main group that I played with were friends of mine. Just good friends. We were a circle of friends. We all were kind of collectively interested in tabletop, so we got into it. And as we started getting further and further into it, my interests and what I wanted from the hobby started to change. Mm-hmm. I wanted more serious games, or at least games with the potential to be serious and like have emotional investment and in-character conversations, and things like that. And obviously I have nothing against my friends, obviously, or else they wouldn't be my friends. But that just wasn't the game that they wanted. They wanted jokes and they wanted silliness and they wanted, kind of just more friends hanging out kind of feel rather than like deep storytelling.
Beer and pretzel.
So, yeah. And then I had started seeing like online groups, like things like the Provokers and other AbTab games where it's like, whoa, you can like have some like hard-hitting experiences playing these games, and I want that. And the group that I was in just was not going to provide that.
Yeah.
And it's like, if I tried, they weren't necessarily going to make fun of me for it. Or if they did, it would be as friends jabbing, not as like a genuine pejorative.
Yeah, yeah.
But like, I wasn't going to get that experience at that table. So I kind of moved away from that group, and I don't play with them as much anymore. I'll still play a game every once in a while because we're friends, and I like hanging out with them as people. But like, the feel of the table was not the feel that I wanted. I wanted that deeper, more connected experience. So I left, and I started trying to find my own way. So if you're in a group that's not doing it for you, especially if they're making fun of you for doing it and they're making you feel bad for trying, you have to get out of that group. There are too many awesome tabletop gaming groups that have the type of game that you want to be in for you to stick around in a group that's going to shoot you down for doing something you like. It's just not worth it. Yeah.
I can't agree more. I couldn't agree more. And I've been a part of those kinds of groups before, and I have known those kinds of players who roleplay is not important. They play a role-playing game, but the emphasis is certainly on the game portion of it. It's really just about kind of getting together, rolling dice, and shooting the shit as friends, like you said. Beer and pretzels, D&D, and there's aspects of that that can be enjoyable. But if you're limited to certain times that you can game, if you only can be a part of one group for whatever reason, time, resources, money, what have you, if that's what if what you want is more than that, and when you try to get the group to respond to that kind of play, and they don't, then yeah, you definitely should be looking elsewhere. You shouldn't just be abandoning the desire to find gaming like that. And it's definitely not that it's Beer and Pretzels D&D is bad fun. You know, there's definitely something to be said for it. But there is more to the game if you want it. If you want that out of it. And like you said, Jeff, I mean, yeah, there's a ton of places that you can go to find that. And that's one of the reasons why I enjoy groups like the Absolute Tabletop official Facebook group. And I'm so thankful that I found it. My group likes role-playing games, and they're getting more into the role-playing aspect of it. But roleplay is not something that they are immediately comfortable with. So finding a group of players who goes in head first, who likes to go in head first, it gives me a nice variety of play styles that I get to experience, and I'm very, very, very thankful for that.
Yeah, and like not only does it like obviously, especially if the group that you're in is shooting you down, like you actually have an opportunity to push some of those things that you want to be able to push in the game. But if you get into a group that all like to play that way and they're good at it, it's going to make your experience with learning how to do that much faster than if you were trying to do that. Like it certainly would be possible for me to push the boundaries within the home group that I was in, to try to inject more role play and to try to make it more serious at times.
Sure.
And to like try to pull on those strings. It would have been really tough. Mm-hmm. But if you're in a group where everybody is already doing that, and now you're the one who's trying to kind of break in and join, it's so much easier, in my experience at least, to break down those walls because everyone else already has their walls down. Yeah. So it's like they can kind of help to pull you in and let you kind of drop some of the act easier than if you were the only person in the group trying to like push the group in that direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And even from my own experiences, when I'm the only one at a table who is, throwing myself in, whole hog, with the role playing, when I've let go of all my inhibitions and I'm just going for it, and I'm the only one, and it's met with, stares or, silence or, snickers, it is difficult to continue with the same kind of tenacity, with the same kind of commitment, as opposed to when I do that and somebody looks me straight in the face and is like, yeah, like I'm on board and I'm going to take what you've done and give it right back. It's similar in that regard to being an actor, where when you're on stage with somebody in a scene, when you give a certain amount of energy with a good a co-star, they give the energy back to you, and when they do that, it's amplified. And so then whenever you reciprocate, it's amplified further. And if you do work in concert well together, just like at the table, by the end of it, again, you have this very emotionally charged, electrifying scene, and it's the kind of thing that will form a memory, a moment that you'll remember for years.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess like kind of try to summarize that like a little bit better. Like in my experience, and you can speak if your experience is different or the same, like each person's mood and like connection to the game tends to move towards the average level at the table as time goes on. So like if you go in like guns blazing, all in, no barriers, and nobody else at the table is doing that, you're probably gonna fall down away from that.
Sure. And
closer towards a more casual experience. And maybe they'll come up a little bit to meet you. Mm-hmm. But the level overall is going to be, the average is going to be lower than where you want it to be. But if you can find a table where like everybody's coming out big, people are going to move towards that energy. Like you said, that energy is contagious one way or the other.
Yeah.
The lack of it is contagious, in which case, like if you go in with all this energy and hype and nobody else has it, they'll drain that out of you. But if you go into a table that's all in and ready to dive in, they'll charge you up, like you say. They'll give you that. They'll return your energy twicefold. Like, I don't mean to like harp on it too much, but like the table that you're at is so important to creating the experience that you want. And you like,
very true.
If you're not getting the experience that you want because of those barriers, finding a table that will help you to break those down instead of push back against it is so important.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think that's one of the reasons why, like, when I run a game, I try very, very, very hard to make sure that I come in with high energy. Even if I'm not necessarily feeling it whenever I get to the point when I need to run a game, when I'm, I had a bad day or whatever, I have to tell myself, okay, yeah, you had a bad day, or this particular thing happened. It's time to pack that away, save it for afterwards, because you have something to do. You have other people right now who are needing for your energy to come in at a certain level so that they can come up and meet it. And if you're the kind of DM who either can't or doesn't want to be the starting off point for the energy, then you need to try to make sure that you find a player to have in your game who is that kind of player, who comes in and they're up here, where they're turned on and ready to go, and their amp's at 11, so that way you as a DM and the rest of your players can rise up and be like, this is what I needed, this is like you said, this is the contagiousness that I needed to catch in this session. So I think it's important, and if you can be that as the DM, well, again, I don't want to go so far as to say it's your job as a DM to kind of set the tone, but it kind of falls to you. If you come in and you're real low energy and quiet, and you start the game off like this, and people can tell that something's bothering you, that's going to set the mood for the entire session. But if you come in and you're super like, let's do this, I can't wait to roll some dice, and, that helps. That helps a lot.
Yeah, I mean, that tool can go a lot of ways, too, because, like, starting off low might not necessarily be a bad thing, depending on the game that you're trying to go into. Like, for example, if we went into that Middle-earth session that I was talking about earlier with the super emotional death and funeral, like, if we went into that game and Lionel was like, yeah, let's get going, I'm ready, like, it just, like, it wouldn't have fit. But if he's just like,
that's a great point.
Like, we're going to get started, and, like, where you start sets, like you said, it sets the standard for where that session's going to go. Mm-hmm. So if you want an impactful start, one way or the other, like coming in at that starting point is really helpful. And I think something that helps as a GM especially is like have a very clear break from not game time to game time.
Oh, yeah.
And what I mean by that is like it's especially easy if you're doing a broadcast game on Hangouts, because you have that we're starting the broadcast button, which kind of can flick that switch for you. But even outside of that, like plan how you're going to open the session and what type of mood you want it to convey, and have a clear break point. So if people are talking and having a good time and like, oh yeah, we're laughing, but you want to start with like a serious, heavy moment, don't just kind of work in from that laughter into that first scene, because it's going to bleed over. But if you can be like, okay, joke time is over. We're going to start. Is everybody ready to start? Now. Okay. You come into this situation and you bring it down to start off with. Like, that's going to set the standard, and it goes both ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like if you're feeling, if the conversation's just kind of, oh yeah, whatever, we're just kind of waiting until the game starts, and then someone's like, boom, we're starting. Like, that opening statement can set the tone and is crucial to setting the tone for how the game's going to proceed, because people will feed off of that. And I think you said something really awesome. If you're a GM who struggles with this but can get into it off of somebody else's energy, don't be afraid to open the game with a scene from like exactly like you said, Jeremy. Have somebody else open the scene. Like give them something before the game. Like we're gonna start the game. You're gonna do a scene. We're gonna do like a flashback of your character doing this or something like that. And then when the game starts, instead of having to be like, okay, like I'm gonna do all this scene setting, you could just be like, okay, we're ready to start. Jeremy, go ahead. And then, you know, now you go into this thing about your character and your flashback and you're building this scene or you're like describing parts of the world and or even just starting a conversation in character as the player. Mm-hmm. Like you can let other people build that energy for you and then latch back in when you're ready to do that.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. And I think, like you said, you know, just having the session start out with the proper emotional resonance, the right tone, is something that can help people just let go and get into it. You know, to just, that's the moment where they can say, okay, now it's time to stop being Jeremy. It's time to start being whomever. You know, it's time to stop worrying about my mortgage or my job or, you know, the bullshit that I experienced trying to get back to where I can sit down on my computer and join this game or get to the gaming session or whatever and just throw yourself into the moment. When you can peel away those inhibitions and dive into one of the things that I think makes this hobby the best kind of free time experience that you can have. You know, why it's worth the number of hours that we put in, because it's unlike anything else. So yeah, is there any kind of last thoughts that you want to kind of throw on the pile here before we kind of wrap this up?
There was one more thing that I wanted to bring up. Just I think places where I see people, in my experience, struggle with this the most, or like the time where I see like the feeling of the session break the hardest. That I think a lot of people would help themselves if they were to drop. Is people are way too hesitant, or they refuse to let their character be scared. Like, I've seen so many times where you'll be playing a session, it'll be going good, people are saying things in character, like there's a mood going, and then like a big bad shows up and it's like terrifying. You know, it's like you're going through and then suddenly like boom, you didn't know that there was a dragon inside this cave and then suddenly there's a dragon in the cave. And instead of being like, holy shit, that's a dragon. Oh my god, what do we do? They'll be like they'll like shit talk the bad guy. They'll be like talking to like a demon. Like I'm sure you've had instances where like there'll be a demon or like an angel, some glorious being way outside of the player's comfort zones, way outside of their ability to fight or deal with in any way. Like it's just so far above them. And then they start like hurling insults at it and like trying to be all cool and like just like don't be afraid to let your character see that and be scared of it, because it'll make everything feel more real. Yeah,
I agree. Or extrapolating on that, or don't be afraid to let your character look foolish, or to fail. You know, that's instead of looking at those things as you losing the game, quote unquote, which a lot of people tend to kind of do. Oh well, how can I be a hero if I'm afraid of a dragon? Instead of looking at those moments as points of failure, look at them as opportunities. You know, one of the people that I've heard be the best at this is probably Tim Carney. You know, especially like in the Provokers games, I've heard him time and time again purposefully take, you know, mechanical hits to his characters or his turns because it makes more sense in the situation. Because what he's doing is he's choosing investment in the situation and in the story and the narrative over mechanical advantage. And I think if you do that, then you increase the ability for you to immerse yourself in what's going on and to make it feel more real.
Exactly, yeah. And like another person that I see like really do this well that I really like, and it's a situation that seems counterintuitive, but that's what makes it all the better. When Lloyd Collins runs Iscloft games, so you would think it's like a Viking themed setting. So basically, like everybody's like these big burly warrior type dudes, and you would think like that's the situation where he'd be like, yeah, I'm just gonna say whatever and talk whatever to whatever I want. But that's not what happens. Like if you run into like a crazy like undead monster in a setting where like monsters are like not a thing, like I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're the biggest, burliest Viking in all the lands. That's going to be scary.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that doesn't mean that you have to be a sniveling coward. You don't have to hide or run away. You can still fight.
Mm-hmm.
But like expressing that fear in character, is like such a big tool for like feeling the emotion of the situation. And like that's like my biggest pet peeve in all of like I won't say in all of tabletop because I'm kind of a snob and have a lot of pet peeves. Side point. But it's a seriously big killer for me when people talk crap to things that they have no business talking crap to.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was in a game one time. I won't say too much specifics because some of those people that were in the game are in this community.
Yeah, sure.
And I don't want to like out anybody.
Yeah.
But one of the characters had an alignment to a specific god. And we met that god, and it was revealed that that god was the antagonist of the situation.
Mm.
So this is like prime time opportunity for amazing immersion. Do I follow my faith or do I follow what's right? Like, how do I stand? Like, if I choose to oppose my god, how can I do that? Like, that's so, like, they're so far above me and, like, they've done so much for me. Like, how do I now stand against them? They're so much stronger. Like, there's no way that they'll be able to do that. Like, there's so much cool things you could do with, like, crisis of faith or, like, crisis of fear and, like, all these, like, moral conflicts and, like, emotional oppositions. It would be so cool to dig into that. And we got to the god. We have like the stage set for some cool moment to play out. He just starts like throwing disses at the god. It's like, yeah, I'll take you on. You got nothing on me. And it's just like, like it was such a like a buzzkill for the situation, which could have been really, really cool and memorable.
Right.
And like instead of letting the character be scared or be conflicted and not know what to do, they felt like they had to like put in their own ego into the situation and like not look like the scared, confused person. Like they didn't want their character to look that bad when looking that bad would have been the coolest thing in the whole session to happen.
Mm-hmm. And I think that goes back to what we were talking about earlier about a lot of it being driven by fear of inhibitions. Of not being able to let go enough and put yourself in the moment enough to realize this is not about how I would respond to this situation. This is about how my character would respond to this situation. And kind of giving it the right amount of thought and letting go of yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And it's not even necessarily like, if anything, what I think more people don't do enough, again, I tend towards the more serious than other people, so we'll take that with a pinch of salt. But like, I think people give their fantasy characters too much badass credit. Now, there's nothing wrong with being a badass. In fact, there should be points in the story where you get to be awesome. Mm-hmm. And you get to like stand against the hordes of evil and beat them down. But I think people sometimes don't think enough. If I were in this situation, how would I feel right now? Like, if I walked into a cave that I thought was just like, oh, I'm just going to go explore this cave and it'll be cool. And there was like a dragon in there. You wouldn't talk crap to that dragon. You'd be like, oh my God. That like, you would like freeze. You would not know what to do. You'd be confused and you'd be terrified. And like, just because you're playing a character in a fantasy world in a game, like, doesn't mean that those reactions go away. Like, so there's kind of like a mix. There's two sides of the same coin of like, sometimes you put too much of you as a person into the character and don't let go. But sometimes you kind of flip the other coin away. If it's like you try to distance the character from the real part of yourself.
Sure.
And you like put up these like walls of ego and wanting to look cool and wanting to like win the game. And instead of just letting it be like a real person. And I think like knowing when to put you into it and when to take yourself out of it is a difficult thing to learn. Obviously, we wouldn't be talking about it if it was easy and everybody did it.
That's a good point.
But for me, when you can get there, it's like easily the most rewarding part of the hobby, at least for me.
Sure. Well, I think that echoes itself even in other aspects of the game. I mean, just like mechanically, a character that has a low stat is just as good as just as good of a source for role-playing material as a character with a high stat. You know, a lot of people look at a low stat and they're like, oh, that's, you know, my charisma is terrible, so I'm never going to do anything charismatic ever. I'm just not going to talk in social situations because obviously I'm never going to succeed. Instead, they should look at that and say, oh, my character is awful in social conversation, so I'm going to look for moments as a player to put my character into social conversation so that I can roleplay how bad he is. It's an opportunity.
Yeah.
It's not a penalty. And it's the same thing, like you're saying, with character flaws. You know, the roleplay side is exactly the same as the mechanical side. Give your character role-playing flaws. Give your character things that you know that they're not going to succeed at, or that they're not comfortable with, or that they are afraid of. You know, go out on a limb, give your character a phobia, and tell the DM what it is. Like, you know, you don't tell the DM what it is, just so that you...
and not only have a phobia, but make it something that's gonna happen in the game.
Yes, absolutely. Work with the DM to ensure that it happens. You know, ask the DM, hey, I would really like to explore this part of my character because I think it'll be a lot of fun to have to try and convey that kind of fear.
Yeah.
You know, again, like we said earlier, it's about kind of stepping out of your comfort zone, finding new challenges.
Yeah. Yeah, and something with that, just like a real short thing here that at least helps me with things like that. Before, like when you make your character, come up with a couple of beliefs / goals for that character that you know are going to cause conflict. Mm-hmm. Like, don't make them things that won't ever happen in the game or are outside or are easy. Like one of my character's beliefs in a game that I just played is that he profoundly and deeply distrusts one of the other party members. Like, he thinks that they're a total scumbag. Everything that they say is dumb, and you should never listen to them. Obviously, there's a compromise of, like, you don't want to, like, completely shut someone out of the game.
Right.
But it's created a lot of interesting situations where it's like, that person's in trouble, and instead of just doing the obvious, like, oh, well, I'm a paladin, so I'm going to heal them, it's like doing the mental toss-up of, like, does this person deserve my help? Like, am I, like, is my duty as a paladin to heal him, or is his mistake as a person and my dislike for him as a personality, does that give me enough incentive to maybe not help him when I should? And, like, you can set those things up as part of your character, like a specific belief. Like, if I'm in this situation, I'm going to act in this way, even if it's harmful to me. Like, I will always go into the burning building to try to save the kids, even if the building's about to fall, even if there's a demon inside. Like, and, like, it kind of forces you to, like, put yourself in situations where you can get yourself into trouble and explore the flaw. Like you said, you don't have to shy away from the flaw, and you shouldn't shy away from the flaw. You should incorporate it as part of the character and use it as an exploration tool to feel that experience out. And when you can kind of write it down on paper, if I'm in this situation, I'm going to do this action. Like, sometimes it can help to drive you to make choices that you wouldn't otherwise make if you didn't have something that you were kind of trying to bind yourself to like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, quantifying it a lot of times will help you not only just stay consistent with, character choice, but also, it will help you remember, if you get 15 sessions in and all of a sudden the perfect situation comes up for your character to roleplay this particular flaw or good thing, if you have it written down, you're like, oh, that's right, I wanted to play this character this way, and then when the moment comes up, you're ready to go.
Yeah, and it kind of just gives you no excuses. Like, if you have it right there as like a planned thing that you're gonna do, like, then maybe when you get to that part, maybe if you didn't write it down, you'd be like, oh, well, I'm just gonna do the thing that's like the easy choice here.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's written down as something that you have like in your mind about the character, that's like a goal outside of yourself or a belief outside of yourself that you've like latched onto this person, then like it's just one more thing that helps to lower the wall when you get to that situation.
Right.
And it kind of helps
That's
you
a
to
good
push
point.
back against that feeling of like, maybe this decision isn't the best mechanically, maybe it's not the best strategically, but it's the best for the story. And because that's a belief that I know about this character, I'm going to follow through on it, despite the fact that it's harmful to the winning the game mentality.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to follow through anyways because it's something that I've built up. It's just one less step that you have to go down when you're trying to really let go of those inhibitions.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And every tool that you have at your disposal to help you get out of your own headspace, to get more into the headspace of your character in the game, to abandon your inhibitions, or as we said, the art of letting go, the easier it becomes. These are tools for a reason, and some of them may work for you and some of them don't, and ultimately you'll have to find the ones that do work for you, to help you throw yourself headlong into your games and your characters. But I am of the belief, and again, obviously, Jeff, just speak on how you feel on it, but I am of the belief that when you are able to do this, to throw yourself in with, like I said, with wicked abandon, that's the moment where you come out with these gems of memories and tales that you can tell, from now in Perpetua, that are these fond memories that you feel like you really lived, because a part of you did. Emotionally, you did go through these moments. And I think that's one of the rare things about role-playing games that you can't really find anywhere else. Yeah, I think that about does it for me, man. You have anything to add?
Yeah, no, I mean, and I'm right there with you. Like, when you can learn to get yourself into those situations, like those are the games that I'll remember for as long as I'm in this hobby and beyond.
Mm-hmm.
Like things like the Fiasco game that we played at AtCon.
Oh, man.
Like, I'll remember that one forever. Or the Middle Earth game that I played in Lionel's game. Like those things. Like, I don't think back to the time that everybody was just hanging out and just having a whatever fun time. Like, I'll remember the times where I felt something and experienced something and got to actually be in another world, even if it's just for an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess just one last thing before we kind of wrap up here. Obviously, we can speak generally, and I feel like we've hopefully offered some good advice. I'd like to believe that we have. Everybody's situation with breaking out of their shell is different, and we can't cover everyone's personal situation.
Sure.
But if this is something that you want to do and you're struggling with it, and it's in a way that we haven't described here, please message one of us. Like, we'd be happy to like help work through some of those barriers. Like, if you have something that we haven't talked about that's unique to you, as much as we can do to help people have the best gaming experiences they can, whether that's maybe setting up a game where like maybe one or both of us are in the game and we try to kind of push in that direction, or we help talk through some things and offer advice. I'm definitely here, and I'm sure Jeremy would be happy as well.
Hands down.
work these things out, because you should be able to have the experience that you want. And if something's stopping you from having that, then if we can help move you in the right direction, then 1,000 times I want to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And if it's something that I can't facilitate, I will try my damnedest to find out where I can point you in order to somebody who can.
Yep.
That's kind of my goal in all of this, is obviously to play games, have fun, and share what I hope is what I can add to the mix. You know, my voice, and hopefully I have some unique ideas and things that I can throw into this collective hobby that we have. But if I can do one other thing, and that one other thing is to help people, then I consider it a roaring success. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's part of the reason that both of us wanted to do this. Other than the self-indulgent and creative parts of trying to work through it,
Absolutely.
If we can provide something that helps people in the hobby, then that's more gratification than any self-indulgent talking thing.
Yeah.
will be.
Well, it helps me feel like I'm giving back, because I've been on the receiving end of that so much, you know, of having the feeling of belonging, or you know, somebody being able to tell me advice as to how to get out of myself, or to enjoy the game a little more, or to sharpen my skills. So I feel like doing this kind of stuff and offering to talk to people when they need it and to help is a part of paying that back, paying it forward, if you will.
Exactly. It's the least we can do to push on that help that we've gotten to the next person.
Absolutely. Well, Jeff, unless you have anything else, man, I think that's pretty much going to do it for our second episode here.
Yeah, I think we're all set. I've said my piece. Yeah, I think that's, hopefully this has been a good one. I think it will be, and I hope it will be.
Yeah, I hope so.
All right.
You know, a lot of people, I think, suffer from this kind of hang-up. You know, I know I do. So
yeah.
Hopefully it strikes a chord with people and has a resonance. You know, having inhibitions is not a bad thing. You know, they exist for a reason. But
of course,
in our hobby, if you want to get into the kinds of emotionally rewarding experiences that you are likely listening to, that has probably brought you to, you know, the Absolute Tabletop community, or maybe has even just brought you here to the Dudes of Yore. If you're looking for those kinds of experiences, I think immersion and, by proxy, loss of inhibition is the key to finding those things. So there's a reason why we're calling this the art of letting go, is because it is an art form. It's not an exact science. It's something that you have to learn how to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I've been Jeremy, and this has been Jeff, my co-host. And
yeah, I think it's my turn to improv our sign-off.
Why don't you take us out, Jeff?
So, here we go. You ready? Brace yourself for this one.
All right.
May all your walls be broken down, and every step towards the experience you want be the road that you travel.
Fireworks.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
And the pyrotechnics go off in the background. The fireworks explode, and they make letters in the sky that says, break down walls or whatever.
I love it. I love it.
With any luck, something about what you have just listened to was both informative and entertaining. Be sure, if you're interested, to get in touch with us. You can find Jeremy Lilley on his YouTube channel, The Erasmus Expeditions, and Jeff Doty can be found on his YouTube channel, Encounterbalance. I guess that just about wraps it up. Well, oh, right. This is but one of many grand tales, traveler. The coin in the hat is much appreciated. We will return with further stories and advice for your listening pleasure. But be sure to return when you pass through here again, and the road has worn you down. The next round is on us.